I said, why me? I ate organic food. I was good to the earth. I was a milk hauler and watched all these beautiful farms go away. We're a very foolish society. We had a sustainable lifestyle here.
A lot of trouble and are deeply concerned about the short time limit. Chairman Wiegans, thank you very much for being here.
Hey, thank you. I think this is, like Marvin Defoe was mentioning earlier, the fourth or fifth time we've been given the opportunity to speak about the notion of obliteration of the headwaters of the Bad River watershed through the open pit mine. There's a couple things I want to just touch on. In the sulfuric acid, the sulfate pollution, decimation of wild rice, the pollution plume from the crushing of a mountain to talcum powder, the obscurity that the mining company wants to create through AB, SB1, all of that stuff is there, and we've talked about all of that. And when we look at the bill, when we look at both bills, we reject both bills. We stand in opposition to both bills because we stand in opposition to the obliteration of the headwaters of the Bad River watershed, and the whole I guess you'd say phenomena of mining is really analogous to watching somebody play the lottery. They play the lottery and they buy that lottery ticket, and then they spend all their time and energy and all their current money in their wallet on how they're going to spend that money. And what do? We look at a person like that as foolish. But that's the lure of that promise of money that GTAC has done to the state of Wisconsin. Everybody in here that wants that so badly is spending money that they do not have. Money that they do not have but been promised to them if you shorten these timelines, if you don't make us talk about these things, if you take away the rights of citizens to come at us, you remove that thing that says will not harm and make it is not likely, because we got the money and the science to say and try and argue that point that it's not likely to harm. All of this stuff is false premises. The other thing is, I shared with some of you last night, all this is also based on the notion of mitigation, or that false premise that we can replace things. In Ojibwe worldview, everything has a spirit. Rocks, plants, animals. And it sounds crazy at first, maybe for those that don't see that worldview through that way. But then we watch Christians and other religions around us honor that passing of life and that notion of a soul going on to the other side. There's no difference in the way that kind of is looked at through an Ojibwe worldview as it pertains to plants, animals, water, rocks. We look at that spirit, right? So I shared last night, mitigation. You take the Bad River watershed, the headwaters of the Bad River watershed, and you obliterate them, and that spirit rises up into the air. And GTAC and everybody else want us to believe that that spirit in the air can be brought over here, and if we create something over here, that spirit's going to find a place to be replaced. But Ojibwe are looking to acknowledge that spirit, that death that's in the air, that destruction, that violence that's in the air, right? And then we look at that place you're thinking about trying to replace our waters with. And guess what? That place has a spirit. That place has a spirit. Now, what may make it seem logical, as though the spirit of the Penokees is going to drop down and magically reappear, and the state of Wisconsin is going to be even, is the fact that the place you're eyeballing has already been so devastated and killed and crushed that the spirit of that place is already in the sky too. And so you have all that up there, and we're trying to fool ourselves as though this pristine, beautiful area that was recognized by Wisconsin forefathers as being an area of natural resource interest, special natural resource interest, a place that was so important and critical It could not be replaced. We want to fool ourselves with this false premise of mitigation. But it goes beyond that, because mitigation and its false premise and this whole, I guess, abnormal notion of replacement is also alive and well in some of the testimony we hear from other townships. We understand, and the bill says there's going to be harmful impacts. They're deemed to be necessary to replace the vitality and maybe these notions of growth and progress in other communities. So one community is going to rise up, right? But one community, namely our home, the Bad River Sovereign Nation, is set to be decimated by this. Our waterways, our aquifers, our air, all these things. And we're trying to tell you that. We've been telling you over and over, this is going to harm us. And it's in your bill. It's in the bill, AB SB1. That shows that. The mining company needs that in there. We need to be able to hurt you, not significantly. But if I ask these guys right here, how much is several? How many answers am I going to get? If I ask, what does the word significantly mean? How many answers am I going to get? The fact is, mitigation and that false premise, when you look at it from a wetland perspective, is the same false premise when you start looking at trying to grow communities. You can't kill our community and send the spirit of our water and everything up into the air and think that Wisconsin's going to be even because over here some other place might be growing. And really, when you attach the dollar signs and filtration of the dollar to that whole scene, it becomes illogical, it becomes absolutely foolish, just like a person chasing that lottery ticket. And I guess the last thing I'm going to say is wrap your mind around what it would take to protect that ore body, what it would take to preserve that ore body, preserve those mountains, preserve Copper Falls State Park, the pristine quality of our waters, 40% of the wetlands of Lake Superior, for future generations. Because the Penokee Mountains are unminable. They're unminable because of their proximity and the environmental carnage that comes with ripping that place apart. Two is sovereign nation. So I just wanted to say that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike?
Chairman
Wiggins? Senator Erpenbach has a question.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you again. I'm under the opinion that I think the only jobs that will be created from Senate Bill 1 or Assembly Bill 1 will actually be in the legal community, which if you're a lawyer is a good thing. So that being said, communication, as you know, is extremely important in any piece of legislation, in any process. The authors of Senate Bill 1 and Assembly Bill 1, have they talked to you? Are they trying to talk to you? Have they reached out? Have you had an opportunity to talk with them, sit down and talk with them about what the legislation means?
The mining company, no, I've not talked to the mining company since Matt Fifield's cold call a few years back. Had real issues when they lied to the Ashland community about permitting their mine under the current regulatory framework of Wisconsin, while at that very meeting at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, they had their attorneys, Tom Piper and others, crafting new legislation. LRB 2035, remember that debacle? Never even made it to public because everybody rebuked it so badly.
Okay.
But we've seen LRB 2035 and it's still around. What we're talking about right now.
What about the author of the Senate bill, Senator Tiffany?
He sent a letter. Other than that, never had any contact with him. I sat down with another senator that was on the committee last Saturday. We sat at the Odavero kitchen table, the farmhouse that's been around since the 20s. Important business that contributes to the fabric of the Mellon area. And real interesting things that came out of that discussion. One was when we talk about renewable energies, Senator Grothman rejected that because of the harmful effects of wind mills on communities. And
wait, so you talked to Glenn? Grothman. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Whoops. But well, it's a fact. It's a fact. I mean, I'll just say this: that that he does have concerns, and I'm not going to debate the legitimacy of his concerns about windmills, but we sat at the Olivero kitchen table in the shadow of the Penokee Hills with a 80-year-old business, 9 full-time, and that can fluctuate depending on the season and the business. And we were talking about jobs and economic development and life, and the senator put forward that they want to create wind farms in his district, but that there's human health impacts that are unbearable, and that ain't going to happen.
Okay, so in other words, what you're saying is he'll fight renewable energy in his district because of health concerns, but perhaps doesn't have an issue with the mine here. So in other words, not in his backyard, kind of a thing?
Well, I guess that's what it would amount to. So, but you know, the whole notion of not in my backyard obscures and allows us to travel at very shallow levels. It diminishes somebody's concerns. So I don't know what the senator's concerns are about windmills. I'd have to educate myself about whether windmills are good or bad for people that have to live next to them. I ain't going to just go NIMBY, and I ain't going to listen. That's what we're trying to say to the senator. This ain't a not in my backyard type of deal. This is something that requires meaningful dialogue, consultation, discussion. And you know, we talked about that a little bit, but that kind of thing is not occurring here.
Okay, thanks.
I think Senator Taylor has a question.
Yes, Chairman Wiggins, I'm going to be leaving, and I'm glad that I had an opportunity to be able to hear you. And I read a quote that I think so many people who have spoke today, that it sums up as well as what I heard from you. And before I read that quote, I want to say I think I also heard from you is to value the diversity that exists in our communities, and that people may not agree or fully understand your culture or components of it, but that it has value and should be balanced in decisions that are being made. And I have to say that I don't know that we've always been the best at that in Wisconsin. But the quote that I read was from individuals from Alaska, actually, that said, handing down our stewardship of the land and to see to our children is a responsibility we all share. Harvesting one resource must not do harm to another. I think that that is what I hear you saying in your comments, and I appreciate your stance, and I appreciate you sharing. I hope that there will be conversation. I hope that the author of the bill, as well as the company, will have an opportunity to sit down and have the experience that you so graciously gave the rest of us to be able to understand your position, and that water is life.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Wiggins. John Schneider, Frank Kostka.
You're listening to a live broadcast on Republican and Democratic bills regarding mining legislation in Wisconsin here on 97.7 WRNC LP Ashland and Wisconsin Public Radio stations 90.9 WUWS in Ashland and 91.3 KUWS in Superior.
All right. Frank? Frank? Is this Frank coming up here? Frank? Yep. All right, thank you. Frank Kostka.
Frank Kostka from Ashland here. I was born and raised here, graduated high school in 1968, and all my memories of Ashland have been kind of a depressed area. Just like the representative from Hurley said, this is an area that's really been struggling for jobs all its life. And excuse me, my wife. I also run a. Yeah, well, when you're trying to run a business and still want to get your ideas across. But where was I? In '68. So I struggled and had some minimum wage scale jobs around the area. and worked on the boats for a couple of years. And finally, the iron ore mine up in Minnesota came over here and recruited people over at the unemployment office. And there was about 15 guys from Ashland that went to White Lakes, Minnesota to work in the mines up there. There was probably about half a dozen of them quit within 6 months, but I stayed up there for about 5 years and worked. And some of the comments about local people not getting jobs is absolutely 100% wrong. I went up there with a high school education, and I was not an A student. But just like everything, I worked as a laborer. You bid on jobs. That's a union company. You bid on jobs through seniority. And after a while, I got to work on track gang and work up. After a while, I bid on a job driving the iron ore trucks. At that time, they were 100 ton. And right now, they're about 250 ton. But at that time, in the early 70s, the trucks were running about $250,000. And here they trained me in a couple of days how to drive these trucks. They only go 30 miles an hour, so they're very low speed. And then gave me the opportunity also to bid on their job, being a locomotive engineer, running a multi-million-dollar locomotive by myself. So the opportunities in an iron ore company like this is great. The apprenticeship program, you don't have to be a 4-year college degree to work there. And most of your truck drivers, you got CDL truck drivers right now that are collecting unemployment. They can go right down there now and get a job. And a lot of these guys will be getting employed building the facility. And naturally, if you're constructing the facility and you show a good track record, they're going to hire you on to stay. And I would imagine that starting wages there are probably going to be $20 to $25 an hour, plus health care, plus retirement, plus you belong to a union. There's a lot of benefits that can be gleaned, I think, by working for a good company like that. And that was just one of I jotted down some of the comments that were made there. But you got 12 organizations in the state of Wisconsin and the federal government that have oversight over it, and everything from the EPA and the DNR down to, I think it was the Historical Society. And we say, the Historical Society ain't got nothing to do with it. Well, you talk to Xcel Energy over here right now, that their project is stopped for probably 2 months because the Wisconsin Historical Society is looking at how the old sewer plant and the car building over there has some significant impact. But the project for cleaning up the brown water, that wastewater down at our Lake Superior is impacted because it's on a standstill waiting for the Historical Society to make the review. So you got these 12 organizations, they're going to have some say-so. And you've got 3 large mining companies that provide mining equipment. Not only they don't provide it to Wisconsin. We got no mines, but you got 3 companies that provide mining equipment all over the world. And if we're gonna go and say we don't want mines in Wisconsin, well, maybe we should boycott these 3 mining companies and tell them to get out of Wisconsin too, because we don't support mining. That's what I've heard mainly here. It's not that we want to consolidate and talk about how we get good, solid mining and be environmentally conscious. Most of the people don't want any mining, period. And to those people, I say, how did you get here? You got here in a car made out of steel, which comes from mines. And in this not in my backyard, I keep kind of seeing that a little bit. We got to be all involved in this process, but providing good paying jobs to people in our community so they can stay here. Well, we just had our census in Ashland. Where did that census in Ashland change? Over 10 years, I think it changed by 40, 60 people in 10 years. We're not a growing community. And I run a business and I talk to people every day, and I've talked to probably 30 to 40 people that are working over in North Dakota. And why are they there? Because of jobs. They want a living wage job. They don't want to work at McDonald's for the rest of their lives. They don't want a minimum wage job. They want to be able to buy a house, buy a new car once in a while. When I went to Minnesota and worked in the mine up there, that's the first time I bought a brand new car. And I bought and owned our own house. I would have never did that in Ashland. When I went up there, I was driving an old beater that we bought for $500. But because I went up there and had the opportunity to have a good living wage, that gave me a chance to elevate myself. And I never came back to Ashland because I didn't want to be put in that situation again. So when I quit the mines and decided to go in the military, I stayed in the military. The reason I came back to Ashland because I decided to start my own business. I didn't come back here looking for a job because I know there was none to be had. Not for somebody that didn't have a college degree to work at Bredding's over here or the BIA building or some of these other facilities that really pay good wages. And if you drive around those facilities, naturally, the parking lot's full of brand new cars. And I'm sure the majority of the people own their own houses. You can't say that about the people. The rest of the people in this community there are living just on minimum wage jobs. And so I'd like to see a big business come in and they say, well, let's invest in some other. We've tried for how many years to bring businesses into this area very unsuccessfully. This is an opportunity that is handed to us, and we need to figure out how to handle it. I applaud Senator Cullen here for at least providing a bill and having some discussion and get the feedback back and forth and create a bill that does work. But to just say, no, we don't want mining, well, let's get rid of those mining equipment companies. Let's take that miner off the state flag. The two people on the state flag are a farmer and a miner. And if we're not going to have mining, we're saying we don't mine, let's get rid of it. Our farmers are already decreasing in population because of regulation, because of, who wants to be a farmer nowadays at the amount of money they earn? It's a tough job, and mining is a tough job. And when I was going back to Minnesota, I lived within 10 miles of the mine. Raised 3 kids, we never had any problems. My dad worked on the railroad, well, he worked on the old ore dock over here as an ore puncher, and working with iron ore. He never had any physical problems, you know, working with iron ore all his life when he was on the railroad. So I struggle with this thing as far as disease and stuff, but I lay it back to, you know, the guys with the college degrees and the engineers and for them to make the decisions and have the oversight to make sure that our air and water are not polluted by a big company like that. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. I think I spoke long enough.
Well, and I thank you for your willingness to testify. Thank you for your service to our country. I just want to point one thing out, and that is that the last mine in Wisconsin that was permitted was the Ladysmith mine. Under our regulatory system, it took 2.5 years to permit that mine. And so there was nothing broken about the regulatory process. It worked to the point that they got permitted, they opened and then reclaimed the mine. Second point is that this company purchased the mineral rights or the lease for the mineral rights under current law. They applied for boring permits under the current law. It was only once they got going that they then said, but we need to change the law. So they see an economic value, now they are trying to change the law. I just want to correct the record a little bit that they saw some value even under current law for getting into the mining business. And a final point is when the Mining Association expert, Steve Donnie, who testified in front of Senator Cullen's bill, he recommended 6 items that they felt could be changed. He said, we believe these 6 items, he said 7, they actually withdrew 1, 6 items that need to be changed and that environmental policies do not need to be changed. He said, we think the existing regulatory system works. So that's not an arguing point, sir. I just wanted to share that record that, in fact, you have mining experts who think our regulatory system is pretty sound.
Was that,
Thank you.
was that an iron ore mine down in Ladysmith?
It was a copper mine.
That's a little bit different type of mining operation though, isn't it?
But it got permitted in 2.5 years. As a matter of fact, it is sulfide. It's more complex.
Much more
And it
complex.
got permitted in 2.5 years, which this mine, the head of Bucyrus, you referred to, the mining company, testified in Senator Collins' committee. These are complicated matters. He said it will take 5, 6, or 7 years or longer to permit a complicated mine. In Minnesota, you're familiar with Minnesota?
Yes.
It takes 3 to 4 years to permit an expansion of a mine. They had not had a new mine in years. So 5 to 7 years is not going to be an unusual amount of time to review the process.
But I'm just concerned about how many people that we're going to lose from our area. To do it in a timely fashion, I guess, and I understand the process, but to do it in a timely fashion, because just like these 30, 40 people working over in North Dakota, maybe they'll never come back. I know when I went to Minnesota, I never came back. And we want to try to keep our population. I'd like to have a good job for my kids to grow up and work at, and have a good living wage for them.
Thank you.
And so I'm concerned about them, and we just got to keep our people in the state and give them good jobs. We can't, the tourist industry, I mean, I've heard about the tourist industry ever since I was a little kid. Oh yeah, the tourist industry. Well, the tourist industry doesn't pay good money. It may be, and the tourists are here and they're gone, but the people working in the hotels, working in the restaurants, they don't have that living wage that we're all striving to get. And people, if they need, they'll go where the money is. And that's why you got so many people, leaving the state or going to North Dakota. And I am convinced that if this mining would come through, that we will employ a lot of people in this area. There are people that they'll have to bring in, granted, maybe computer savvy guys or guys that are specifically trained on specific functions of the mine, but there are a lot of laborers and truck drivers. And I went to WITC and got some flyers. They got 3 main classes they teach over there for the trades. One is Marine Corps, or Marine Repair, which is one of 3 schools in the whole United States. But once they got out of that Marine Repair course, they got to leave here because there's no opportunity for them. The other one is machinist and welding. And those 2 would be employed by the mines. And I'll guarantee you, if the mines were here, WITC would tailor classes to meet their requirements. And we would be having a feeder school with people coming out of school and going right to work on the job over there. Because the more money they can save on OJT, the further ahead they're going to be.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony. Richard Kettering, Tom Fitz, Chris McGeshik, Chris LaForge, Joe Rose Sr.
It is still morning. Good morning. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity that you presented to us. I also would like to hope that this is the beginning of a regional conversation. I've participated in the last 3 days in several different events, Superior Days, training session. I attended the Ashland County Mining Impact Committee meeting on Friday morning, and I heard, and similar to Mayor Griffith's comments, I heard repeatedly about we're all in this together. There is no us and them. And so I challenge you, all of you that are here and your compatriots down in Madison, to not forget us. This should be a beginning of a regional conversation on the economy. This should not be the end if the mine doesn't happen. I am not convinced that it can happen. I agree that it's in the wrong place. And to that end, I wrote a statement. Thank you for traveling to this beautiful, magical land to hear our stories. This story of the people of the land being displaced is not new, nor is it singular. This story of greed and ignorance over the land and its resources has been repeated many, many times in this country and around the world throughout the ages. In fact, this grabbing of resources has happened in this very place a century ago. The debris from the last resource extraction boom impedes economic development to this day. Ashland is currently engaged in a process of cleanup of only 1,500 feet of shoreline that is expected to cost over $100 million. We're currently being sued by Excel as a city to participate in the payment of that. What we don't have to pay for in the lawsuit is going to come out of the ratepayers. They've already gotten the permission from the Public Service Commission. All the profits from the schemes that have fouled our shoreline have long been siphoned off, gone as the great trees that once towered over the ridge in the Penokees. By some estimates, restoration of Wisconsin's Lake Superior South Shore between Ashland and Superior could cost over $5 billion. Who used to pay for this? Do you not think the concrete abutments, the foundations, the tens of thousands of pilings all along our shore are an economic liability? Ashland has 2 miles of shoreline adjacent to the core of the city that is virtually inaccessible from the waste of the last boom. Ashland's largest economic asset, Chequamegon Bay, is mostly inaccessible. Our swimming beach and campground 3 blocks from Main Street is built on several feet of cast-off slab wood out of expediency. Our use of these places will be severely impacted during the Superfund cleanup, a cleanup that is to be paid for by charging us ratepayers. This and much more are the remnants of the last boom out-of-state interest brought to us. There is currently a resource tug-of-war happening in India I can't help but compare to our own circumstances. In a state that has a fully functioning agrarian economy with full employment, a South Korean company wishes to build a mine, a steel mill, and a harbor from scratch. The people of the land insist they do not need this development. The Korean company is selling it as jobs, jobs, jobs. The Indian government is concerned with the GDP. And I'm afraid that's what our government is concerned with, is the GDP for the state and not the people of the region. Does quality of life have no meaning? Finally, as you leave, remember your time here, and you pass again over the Penokees on your way home. I pass on to you some lines from a poem. God is alive, magic is afoot. God is afoot, magic is alive. Alive is afoot, magic never died. Yes, God is alive, and she is watching us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Pitts.
You're listening to a live broadcast of Democratic and Republican mining bills and a listening session about that at
I
American
am Tom
Ashland.
Pitts. I'm a professor of geoscience at Northland College, and I've been leading geology field trips through the Penokee Range for about 14 years. And what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about the rocks just for informational purposes. I also have a few diagrams that I'll be referring to in a moment. Okay. All right, first, we have to go back 1.9 billion years when these rocks were deposited in this area when the Earth was a very different place. The ocean and atmosphere were very different compositions. And through a very long, complicated geologic history, what happened is that the rocks were then tipped up they were originally deposited horizontally, then they were tipped up to the north. Okay, so that now the angle that they go into the Earth is about 65 to 70 degrees.
Now, you're not going to go year by year, are you?
No, not quite.
I mean, you say you're a professor.
Okay. All right. So this is through a long... I could. Okay, so through a long, complicated history, this is what it came to look like. I've got a few of these around, and I'll leave them out so you can see. But they're tipped to the north like this. This is the ridge of the Penokee Range. The rocks in the Ironwood Iron Formation are very hard rocks and makes up the backbone of the ridge right there. Okay, so a little bit about the rocks. It is primarily the minerals magnetite and quartz. It's the magnetite that contains the iron. Like all rocks, rocks are complicated, so there's a mix of things in there. It's primarily quartz and magnetite, but there is some pyrite, which is iron sulfide. There's some rutile. There are other minerals in there, as there are in all rocks. There is also some hematite and some places in there where some fluids move through the rock and change things into what are soft ores, enriched ores, and that's what originally people were mining in the Ironwood area along the Penokees, and it's smaller areas, and they were going in there getting the iron deposits that were high grade. Okay, and that was done by underground mining when they were moving as little rock as possible. Then what happened in the 1960s and 70s was that the taconite process was developed, and the iron ores, the soft ores, were deep. The remaining ores were very deep, and it was no longer economic to extract them. So the taconite process was developed, and the mining changed. So it's no longer underground mining. It's now surface mining in big open pits. So what would happen as the mine was being developed, at first it would just be the Ironwood Iron Formation that was removed, but then as the pit went deeper, when it got to be about 400 feet deep, then overlying rock in what is called the Tyler Formation would have to be removed, and also the underlying rock in the Palms Formation. Okay, and so some other rock would also have to be extracted, and that is not economic ore, and there's also some uneconomic rock within the Ironwood Formation as well. So there would be some waste rock from the Tyler, from the Ironwood, and from the underlying Palms Formation. Okay, so the concern is that, you know, what is the composition of all of these rocks? And like all rocks, the Palms and Ironwood are complicated. So we need to know what the mineralogy is in the overlying Tyler Formation as well. In the Tyler Formation, it is a mix. And the lower part of the Tyler Formation does contain pyrite. It's not exposed in a lot of places along the Penokee Ridge because it's a softer rock, but it's known from a few places where you can see the Tyler Formation. It does have pyrite in it. There's also pyrite in the cores and the few cores that people have that are publicly available. The issue with the pyrite and some of the other minerals is that when they're brought to the surface and ground up, they react with oxygen and water and create sulfuric acid, which then changes the chemistry of the water, and more ions can be dissolved in that. There's also the mineral apatite in the Tyler Formation, which has other possible problems associated with that. So there's also the associated fine dust associated with the milling process. So we need to look at all of the mineralogy of these rocks. We need to understand the mineralogy and understand the potential impacts of those, including acid mine drainage.
Can I ask a question, Tom? We've heard at different hearings in Madison, and the company and the proponents have said, but it's just a little sulfide. So it's an insignificant amount of sulfide. Can you talk about what even a small percent of sulfide does, what the impact is of a very small percentage?
Yes. Well, I've seen the base of the Tyler Formation. It's about 2% pyrite, and that is enough to be a concern. What happens is the process of acid mine or of acid waste development happens gradually at first, but then after the pH within the waste rock pile is low enough, then it can actually happen faster. So 2% is enough that is something we should be concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. Chris McGeshik. Chris LaForge. Is Chris McGeshik? Is Chris? Yeah, I see Chris in the back. Christopher LaForge, Joe Rose Sr., Mayor Bill Whalen, and Kelly Westland. Chris is the tribal chair, Muskegon Chippewa community in Crandon. Thank you very much for coming up here.
Yes, bonjour. Chris McGeshik from, is this working? Can you hear me back there? Yeah. All right, that's what's important.
You have your hand on the right one.
All right. Chris McGeshik from the Muskegon Chippewa Band of Lake Superior Chippewa. And essentially I'm here today to discuss and say that I'm not for SB1, AB1, or SB3. I'm here to speak in opposition to all three until somebody can explain to not only me but everyone else within these communities in the state and show us that these types of activities can actually be done in a safe environmental manner. And I think if you looked at what you're trying to sell these bills on, it's coming from the governor's level, working with the mining company, and it's all about jobs. But you're not looking at the jobs that are currently going away within all of the communities or throughout the state of Wisconsin even. We have mills closing in central Wisconsin that affect jobs, okay? If you're saying that you're gonna provide jobs for 1,000 people or 2,000 people or even 6,000 people, how many jobs out there right now can we affect by working with other industries and working together as tribal communities, local entities, whether it's a city government, a county government, or even the state government, combining and bundling our resources to develop more jobs. We can do that, but we're not looking at that. We're not expending money or your time developing that. We're sitting here expending our time and our resources to get a bill passed so a mining company can come in and destroy the lands. That's what we're wasting our time on. And it is a waste of our time to allow this type of activity to continue. We need to put a stop to it. I'm a retired state DNR conservation warden, okay? I've worked for the DNR. And when it comes to enforcing rules and regulations and laws, we look at the stewardship aspect that we all talk about. What's dangling right now is the state of Wisconsin is being caught by some money, okay? You're hooked into this, okay? What you as senators and assembly people need to do is, okay, the state of Wisconsin's caught being reeled into this money factory, do the right thing, release it, okay? Let it go back, catch and release. Practice it all the time, okay? When it comes to the legal terminology that you have within these bills, it's all about shalls, wills, mays, ands, but, and or. Language that when you have a shall in these bills, it's something that's required. And you have shalls on this side and you have shalls on that side, but the DNR is not going to be able to meet those shalls on both sides. Therefore, your permit is going to go forward. You're giving us a double-edged sword out here. It's all wrong in how you interpret or write these bills. And we all remember when, at least I do when I'm growing up, watching TV and cartoons on Saturday, on how a bill is passed, and you see the little train going through. We're relying on you individuals to do the right thing, okay? As tribes, my people, and other nations rely on their tribal chairmen to do the right thing and their governments to do the right thing. That's why we're here to speak in opposition of this. We're not here to allow the stewardship that the state of Wisconsin thinks is the appropriate measure to take place. We're going to show you how the proper stewardship is when it comes to mining. We had the Crandon mine over in Mole Lake. We dealt with that for a number of years. We are now proud landowners with the body of minerals beneath that, okay? That's how that situation ended up being rectified. But the tribes as a whole, we've owned this land. We were here, okay? You're telling us that we have to succumb to whatever the state of Wisconsin or the government entities want to do to develop up to 6,000 jobs, we're going to allow you to destroy our home territories? No, that's not going to happen. It cannot happen. And in closing, the DNR, when you develop these bills and these laws, you always look at the financial impacts, correct? What's the impact going to be on other agencies or other town governments or other city governments or even us tribes? Okay, you are impacting us as a tribe. We have to expend finances to come in and sit here and try to explain our position on something we either agree with or we disagree with. But the whole process, you should be coming to us as tribal leaders. That is what the government-to-government relationship is all about. It's not a letter. I mean, I can make phone calls. I'll talk to you one-on-one. It doesn't matter to me. But the person that should be knocking on my door, making a phone call to me, is the governor, okay? I can call the governor's office, and you know what? I'm not going to get an answer. But I'll guarantee you, if he calls my office, I will answer. I'll give him my cell phone number. I'm not afraid to talk to the government. That's not something, that's something we are hired to do. And that's something, I think, Ms. Bewely, I've spoke with you numerous times, Senator Jauch, the same. I've seen you at a number of other meetings, but the financial impact that you're dealing with is the cost analysis and whether or not the DNR can even have the appropriate staffing to go through this permitting process and review those applications, and who can come up with a good analysis for us or anybody else that's going to say, we're going to allow for this mine to be permitted because we've reviewed all this information. I don't think even these individuals that have these geological degrees could come up in 400 days and tell you, oh, all right, we can do this. We can tell you that it's not going to be a good thing. But your time limits are down to 10 days here and whatever the other timelines are. They are not out there far enough for everybody to have a say. And that's why I speak against all of these things. And when it comes to the DNR, you also have to look at them. I would rather have some of them individuals here to tell me how they, as individuals, not as an agency, as individuals, feel about what their government is telling them as their employer they have to approve and deny, okay? Because I know these people. I've worked alongside these individuals, and they do have concerns, but they're towing the government party line, which is wrong, okay? Allow them to speak their mind. I think a number of people here would love to hear what they actually have to say, and it's not going to be in support of either of these bills that are looking to be voted on. And in closing there then, I appreciate your time, and I'll give you my phone number and you can call anytime. Miigwech.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Chris LaForge.
Thanks very much. Good morning for the next 2 minutes. I saw Scott Griffin do this and save 2 pieces of paper, so I'm going to try it. I'm going to try and testify off my computer. 2 quick points of information before we get going. Klein Mining is a non-union shop, and they have actively worked to suppress unions in their coal mines in our nation, and that's a fact. Second thing, Buckminster Fuller, the renowned engineer, said before he died that there is enough metal and other extracted commodities above ground now that we never have to mine anymore. We just have to learn to recycle and reuse it. He died in 1983, and I'm glad that he said it before he died, but that was a long time ago. We've done a lot of mining since. And the last little point of information is that there was a benefit analysis done for this mine project by Northstar. But remember, there was no cost study done. And responsible politicians would require a cost-benefit analysis. Okay, thanks. Why not mining in the Penokees? My name's Christopher LaForge, and I'd like to give you a little greeting from the future. I'm an optimist. At our homestead, we've used no fossil fuels or nuclear fuel to heat, power, and support our lives and our work and our business for 22 years. No fossil fuels, no nuclear fuels. We use receptive technology to avoid the destructive effects of extractive technology. Mines, mining, and corporate designs rely on extractive technology and create boom and bust cycles that generate huge profits for these out-of-state corporations that are currently funding our governor and his Senate and legislators' leadership. The corporations buy our representatives, they get their destructive laws passed, and they come in and they make a killing in our Northland. We've demonstrated how to live sanely, quietly, with minimal harm in our region. We've done this with long-term impacts that have been positive and have helped others to learn to live with renewable energy and sustainable businesses in our locale. The dollars in sustainable businesses get recycled locally. They stay in our economy. This is the economic development we need in our entire state. Extractive technologies are inherently short-term and geared towards profit for their large corporations. They support profit for the owner class and keep workers impoverished while their work feeds the avarice of these wealthy people. Receptive technology is inherently democratic and empowering. It allows for local control and the recycling of capital within our bioregion that the wealth is generated in. It begins the process that will allow for a healthy, resilient communities to thrive as they work to revive a network of our independent regions. Receptive technologies include solar and wind electrical generation, which is my business. Reuse and recycling of everything in our economy can be done receptively, and cradle-to-cradle engineering and investment strategies will be inherently local. Too big to fail has failed. Boom and bust has always left us broke. We know how to move beyond the short-term thinking, and many of us have individually proven that receptive technology works and it's superior. AB1, SB1 would unleash mining corporations throughout the state and other interests that might just want high-volume wells to make a killing in our state and take the profit and leave the waste. In the testimony that I emailed to the recent committee hearings down in Madison, I listed many specific details that makes this SB1, AB1 unacceptable. That's in my testimony that I emailed. Yet, I see the effect of corporate graft on our government leaders in the leadership of the legislature and the Senate. To even consider this long list of corporate undercuts to our mining laws, the leadership of the Senate and the legislature are showing that the influence of greed works. And it's a darn shame, to use polite language. We have wonderful lives up here. We would like to continue them. For this to happen, we will need the truth to be heard. The truth is that modern iron open pit mines are increasingly automated. There is no boom in jobs for us here. The truth is there is no way to turn the Penokee Mountains into dust and not have it destroy our watershed and the way of life of our friends at Bad River. The truth is that Klein Mining cannot make an environmentally safe mine here. That is why they make shell corporations that will go bankrupt, GTAC, leaving the profits in Klein's hand and the destruction of our wetlands in ours. And the truth may well be that right now our republic is so weak that we will not be able to stop this assault on our right to our livelihood. Remember this, though. We're here for the long run, body, mind, and soul. And if the legislature allows this corporate fantasy mongers to steamroller over our laws, they're going to have to face our wrath if they come up north with their huge automated tools of destruction. The monkey wrenchers are ready. I'm nonviolent, but my friends aren't. Sorry. Don't let this happen. Civil unrest in northern Wisconsin's unavoidable. When we stood on the tracks years ago to stop another insanely greedy project, we avoided bloodshed and we said no. Stop this bill in its tracks. Do it for Walt Brissett. Do it for the Churchills. Do it for Sigrid Olson and Gaylord Nelson and John Muir. Do it for Lake Superior. You can avoid bloodshed once more. Do it for the future. Let's do it. I'll email that. Very good.
Thank you, Joe Rose, Senior. Coming back for another billion, huh? Joe? Oh, wait, Joe's coming up with, I believe, Joe's coming up, then Bill Whalen, Kelly Westland, Connie Frank, and Jamie Dunn, Michael, I think it's Murtis, Joe Dan Rose. So we're moving through, but we've got a lot of slips. We're letting people speak, and I sure appreciate your patience. Some members, as I say, have had to leave. We've got a long trip home, but we are here and truly appreciate your words. Joe, thank you for being here.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Moka angizas, nindas in a cause. Megazine dodem. They must kazibi ordain hang and dunjaba. Nima dewa nene. My honest Nabe name is the Rising Sun. I'm of the Eagle Clan of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe, and a member of the Grand Medicine Lodge. I thank you for coming here today in lieu of a legitimate hearing, which we've been trying to get for a long time now. Invitations have been extended to the Wisconsin legislature by the Bad River Band and others from the people who will be affected by such a bill. So I thank you for coming for this listening session. I look back on a little bit of history to the colonial powers, France and England and others, and the relationships between those colonial powers and the tribes. There were treaties, and these first treaties were always treaties of peace and friendship. And there was a reason for that. The reason being that the balance of power weighed heavily in favor of the tribes at that time. And then as that time goes on, we won't have time to cover all of that history here today, but we get through the American Revolution, the new nation. The balance of power is beginning to change. And so Andrew Jackson was elected President of the United States in 1828. He ran on a strong expansionist ticket. By 1830, the Congress of the United States passed a bill called the Indian Removal Act. And that set the stage for a whole series of land cession treaties that were to occur. And this was possible now because the balance of power had shifted in favor of the United States. So I think about a chief by the name of Blackhawk, chief of the Ozaki Nation, a people very closely related in language and culture to the local Ojibwe, who lived in that in northern Illinois, that Rock Island area. And that Indian Removal Act gave the President of the United States the authority to forcibly remove any and all tribes residing east of the Mississippi River, and forcibly to remove them to those dry, arid wastelands west of the Mississippi River. It was the Ozaukee chief, Blackhawk. Oh, by the way, the Chicago Blackhawk hockey team is named after him. And he refused to remove from his ancestral homelands. He refused to sign any land cession treaties. And so that resulted in military action with the Illinois militia. Blackhawk, even though he was greatly outnumbered, routed the Illinois militia. So the United States military was called in, and they called that the Black Hawk War. But what it resulted in was a systematic slaughter of men, women, and children at that time. And so northern Wisconsin was considered kind of a wasteland at that time. But then the lumber barons and the mining interests, commercial fishing interests, and all the other interests began coveting the resources of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And so in 1825, representatives from the United States government called the various tribes together at Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. There had been hostilities between some of them because they had been forced into each other's territory by westward expansion. And so the published agenda there at that time was to reestablish peace between the different warring tribes. But there was also a hidden agenda. They wanted to establish land ownership for the various tribes, which would set the stage for a whole series of land cession treaties. So the first one was our nickname for it was the Lumbermen's Treaty, the Treaty of 1837. And then came the Miners' Treaty, the Treaty of 1842. And then after that came the Treaty of 1854. So I want to talk a little bit about these treaties. In those treaties, the Indian leaders had only two choices. They could enter into a land cession treaty and give up millions of acres of land for pennies on the dollar. And so that resulted in giving up the northern one-third of the state of Wisconsin, most of Upper Peninsula Michigan, and the northeast quarter of the state of Minnesota in those three treaties for pennies on the dollar. And the other choice that they had was to go to war with the military might of the United States. And they know what happened to the so-called 5 civilized tribes down in the southeast: the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, the Creek, and the Seminoles. They know what happened there. They know what happened to Blackhawk and his people. And so the leaders came together and they decided to enter into these treaties. And so, true to native tradition, they were looking 7 generations down the road and asking themselves, what will we be leaving to that 7th generation, to those yet unborn? And so the reason I know this story is because I'm a direct descendant of 2 of the chiefs that signed that treaty of 1854. The one that established reservations for all of the bands in Minnesota, in Wisconsin, and Michigan. I'm a direct descendant of Mukadeba our chief blackbird from the Bad River Band, and also Chief Okandekan from the Ontonagon Band. And so, according to the Treaty of 1854, the Lake Superior Ojibwe lost a tremendous amount of land and were placed on postage stamps.
The Native people also knew that the Creator had given everything for us to survive on this earth.